now.
Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, I have Daniel Torchia, PR manager, owner of Torchia Communications. But before we get into our conversation, I want to tell you real quick, if you're at home and you're listening to this or you're mowing the lawn or whatever it is you're doing while you listen to podcasts, there's a little guy on your shoulder. We're going to call him the podcast angel. And he's standing there and he's saying to you, you want to start your own podcast, don't you? You want to start your own podcast. Well, if you want to start your own podcast, I've started lots of podcasts, and you know what's a pain in the butt? Recording and producing podcasts is a pain in the butt. The easy part is the talking. The hard part is the recording and the producing. The fun part is the talking and hanging out with your guests. The hard part is producing the podcast and loading it up onto all the different places it needs to go and producing it, blah, 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 blah. So you know what the best thing to do is? Check out getagripstudios.com, man. That's right, fully virtual. I'm talking to Daniel Torchia right now over the internet. I don't even need to be here. I could be anywhere in the world doing this. So go to getagripstudios.com or just pick up a phone and call Scott. Scotty Wachter in the studio here, and he can help you out. So go to getagripstudios.com, baby. What's up, Daniel Torchia?
I'm very well, Michael, and yourself?
I'm doing amazing, man. Well, you know what? I've seen better days, actually. I know you have too.
Well, we have, but in PR, I got to be an eternal optimist and also from a faith perspective as well. So finding the joys in these changing, turbulent times.
What joys are you finding in these turbulent, changing times?
Well, I used to be a workaholic. I used to spend a lot of time commuting and traveling, both on car and air. And now much less of that, none of that actually. And I'm home, obviously 24/7 pretty much. And I'm grateful that I have a home, grateful that I have grass, grateful that I live with a decent community. They're not perfect, but a decent community. And I'm not perfect either. So it's a time with those conditions. It's a time that's allowing me to test my sense of virtue, test my skills, and through a little bit of fire, hopefully come out better.
It reminds me of the quote from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I think it's the Fellowship of the Ring, and I'm gonna mess it up and I'm gonna screw it up, but hopefully I'll give you the essence. So Frodo's carrying the ring of power, and it's a heavy burden on him. He says, why do I have to be born in these times? He says to Gandalf, something like that. And Gandalf turns to him and says, we don't get to choose the times we live in. We only get to choose what we do in the times we live in. And so to do with what we have, or I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something about you have to do what you're doing in your times. What is it that you think that you need to do and at this time and place, Daniel?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is multiple things. Mm-hmm. One of the things is, we always have to witness. I mean, witnessing is something that I heard growing up in circles of faith. Witnessing by behavior first, and then by words if you have to quote St. Francis. But also an opportunity now to let go of false ambitions or let go of a kind of messiah complex, like I got to heal the world. Like I gotta be a champion for everything. And I used to say yes to everything. I used to stretch myself thin too much. And now I get to step back and realize what this gift of self is to others. Gift of self. My gift of self might be to my family right now, but I'm blessed. I have a guy who lives really close to me, who's a monk. No joke, a monk building a monastery with his own hands. And he's calling me up a lot, asking me to help him with shingles and roof and ice and rain, films for his roof. And I got no clue about these things, but I'm going to help him. And that's my little story here. But whether it's a kid crying or a spouse that needs help or a neighbor that's trying to build a roof calling me who knows nothing to help, I think it's a question of letting go of my ambitions, very linear and very limited in perspective, and letting myself follow what I would call maybe the will of divine providence. And it might not be what I expected, might not be what I studied for, but to hell with all that stuff, because maybe there's another plan working well. These are maybes. I don't know much. But those are some things, blessings. I see lots of blessings because I'm spending more time with people. I'm being more present in the moment. When a workaholic like myself, my mind wasn't really present in interpersonal relationships much. These are all good things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what a workaholic is. And if you're listening to this right now, Daniel and I are both Catholic men, and we've committed to our faith. And so if you haven't figured out what the St. Francis reference earlier, now you know. So when he's talking about faith, he's talking about his Catholic faith. But what's interesting, you made the word will, in the Our Father, it has your will be done. Not my will, but your will. And it's interesting, you often I've had conversations, what's if there is a light, okay, which I'm not sure there is in all this. If there is a light, one of the things that I've had the great honor to do is talk to people about my faith. And I was asked a question about, why was Jesus crucified? Right? That's an interesting question. Right? And I told the person that, the message of Christianity at its fundamental basis, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I should have asked the priest first. I think I have. I think Father John and I talked about this quite a bit. But the message of Christianity deeply, very deeply, and this is my belief, is that if one accepts one's suffering, it can be transcended. And there's something in that, in the idea of your will be done. There's something in that. There's a call, almost a call to be like Christ, right? There is a call to be like Christ in Christianity, especially from Paul. And when you think about that, what does that actually mean? Does that mean to perform miracles? Does it mean to move mountains? Does it mean to heal the sick and the blind? And maybe it does mean all that stuff. But what it really means is accepting your destiny, accepting your suffering, fully accepting it. And then when it's accepted, and constantly accepting it, and then possible transcending it based on the acceptance of it. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel that we do adapt to our circumstances. I think of some stories that I know firsthand of men and women who have been incarcerated and in jail or confined to a wheelchair or some other disability, and yet they'll find fulfillment, joy, blessings in all that. And to be honest, God gave us, our Creator, and you can call the Creator whatever you want, but we were created. I didn't create myself. I certainly didn't create you or kids. But somebody gave us life, and somebody gave us freedom. And those are number one blessings. I think those are what we want to protect in our world. But some people might have life with no catastrophe or calamity or issues, and they might have a deep faith, but they might not get tested.
Nobody ever had that life. That life never existed, Daniel.
I agree with you, because we're fallen, because we're imperfect, because we're free to be that. We're free to be hedonists. I got lots of friends who are hedonists. I'm always tempted to kick up my feet and say, to hell with you. I'm going to have my beer and consume what I want to consume. But we're all tempted. But the person who gives to the other, as opposed to consuming, have a more permanent joy. So I believe in suffering. I believe in carrying a cross daily. But carrying the cross daily means that you're listening to people who have needs. You're trying to imitate the divine physician. I'm trying to imitate a divine physician, which is another name that a Catholic would know, or a Christian, for Jesus. And I believe in the spiritual. Who doesn't believe in the metaphysical?
Many
then
don't.
we are attuned.
Many don't believe in the metaphysical.
So if anybody believes in pure hedonism, materialism, me, myself, and I, well, I enjoy it, but it has a marginally return. It has an addiction aspect to it, and I know I've lived it. We've all succumbed to our inclination for consumption and things that aren't necessarily good, like vice in all its different permutations. And we know that it doesn't ultimately lead to fulfillment. I go to bed at night well, And there's nothing more I want than to go to bed at night well, much more than a yacht, much more than a Ferrari. I want to go to bed well. It's when I've
I want to
spent my
unpack your position a little bit because I think it's interesting that the Christian perspective of, there's almost like there's this sense of amongst people that, you know um, there's this choice, and the choice is that one can pursue one's fleeting desires or proclivities towards sin and vice, and vice and sin are fun. Like, let's face it, when you're in the moment, it's fun, whatever it is that you're up to. But at the same time, I think that there is the counterweight is not abstinence or like the rejection of that. So there's like the pursuit of pleasure, which would be like your Foucaultian, Michel Foucault, or those French philosopher types and that. And then there's a different thing, which would be more characterized by what Jordan Peterson was talking about. And this is this idea of living a meaningful life is what is fulfilling, right? So if one pursues long-term objectives, if one pursues their faith, they are rewarded in and of itself. It's a reward. And that reward is one that's difficult to explain to other people. But when you're in it, you know it. And when you're out of it, when you were in it, you know it. But if you've never been in that, you may never know that. And I think that is the argument, this idea between the chosen and the elect or whatever. That you have in faith, these can't remember what the word is for it, but there's these apologetic and theological arguments about whether you're chosen as a Christian or whether you can become a Christian or whatever it is. I'm sure you've heard these arguments before. But for me, there's something to be chosen in the meaningful life, choosing this is why the Catholic Church makes it very clear that marriage is a vocation. It's interesting to look at it like that, right? That it's not about being happy, which is important in life too, but it's about choosing the meaningful life, which kind of leads into what we were talking about earlier before we decided to record it. But before we get to that, where are you at in terms of your business right now? Is it down? Is it up? What are you able to do?
So we run a public relations agency with right now we're going through storms. We're going through a reduction in total revenue, but it's a manageable one. It's actually a good one from a selfish perspective because we have had to lay off one person, not renew one contract, and one person resigned. So we're down 3, but and I'm very sad to see someone's livelihood go. 2 out of 3 left because of contracted business. So it's very sad. But it's been better for us because it's been manageable workload. And also it's been very gratifying for me, Michael, in the following way. When a pandemic or a macro force majeure, as they say in insurance, hits all the industry, you want to communicate more. Those who are strong, those who have hope of being present when there's a recovery, in our clients, they're communicating more. And so what I'm finding gratification from, to talk about gratification, personal gratification, is I have about 60 to 70% of my clients that are now, when push comes to shove, being amazing pupils, amazing students of us, communication consultants, communication gurus. I'm going to flatter myself here. We've been coaching these people in PR and communications for 10 years, some of them. And now when the push comes to shove, they're communicating to their consumers. They're communicating to their stakeholders. And they're issuing more announcements of safety protocol, who's got COVID, who's tested positive. And that's really good behavior. And we're proud of it as communications consultants. But then 20%, 30% of our business have no more revenues, and therefore they can't pay us. So bad debt, Bad debt is up, clients leaving is up, revenues down, but we're surviving very well. So I'm grateful, and we're in a service business, so I don't have to travel to meetings. Everything is on WebEx or Zoom. So from all intents and purposes, a PR agency, a communications agency like ours should be surviving, and we hope to recoup those dollars soon.
So you're looking to return to thriving, but let me unpack something that's maybe a little bit of an awkward topic right now. Every week from, let's say, the middle of June till the end of June, I would receive communications from corporations about support of trans communities, about battling systemic racism, and issues like that. Now, you're a communications company. You must have encountered some of this. How are you handling this with your clients? Do you have any clients requesting information about this? Do they have policies that are with respect to, um, I think Black Lives Matter is a horrendous organization, dude. I mean, ridiculously unhealthy and bad for Western society. And I think it's funded by dark forces. There's my opinion. So if you don't like it, okay, you can write whatever you want on the internet. So how are you handling? Do you have clients that want to come out in support of these various, um, groups? And how do you handle that as a Christian?
Yeah, well, I think we have to resist knee-jerk reactions to just follow the bandwagon, or worse, do something because we think it's cool in the eyes of an audience group.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've had clients ask us, and the reality is that a crisis like the social and racial riots and protests in the US and around the world, it's an opportunity to discuss. It's an opportunity for dialogue and bridge building. Now, supporting Black Lives Matter, the organization, is very different than supporting racial equality, equality for all the races, all the people, all the religions, and non-religious. Um, Black Lives Matter as an organization, we would tell our clients, before you support this or that charitable group, why don't you look up their charter? Why don't you look up their raison d'être? And then consider the cause versus the partner you're going into bed with. So these are basic things, right? These basic principles of being educated. But yes, we should be talking about racism. We should be talking about ageism. We should be talking about all these different threats to equality among people. Equality among people, I don't mean equality of outcomes. I don't mean equality of where you're at in your life, status in life. I mean equality as a dignity of the human being, dignity of life, and dignity of freedom. And that's the starting point. I think if we, PR people are supposed to find bridges. I'm not someone's conscience. Neither are you. I'm not someone's supreme judge or creator. Neither are you. I would like to share with people my thoughts, but I do that through a bridge. And what I think you and the audience, Michael, should think about is worldview. What we're dealing with right now, what I'm analyzing more than ever, is the differences in worldviews. So my worldview follows, you named it, I follow Jesus Christ. So I respect life, I respect marriage, I respect freedom, I love everyone, common fellowship. Okay, I don't believe in honor killing. But guess what? I've got people in my community that believe in honor killing. I've got people in my community that are staunch capitalists. Good for them. I got people in my community who are staunch socialists. We all still have to find a table where we can get together. So where I have no answer for you, I have no advice for you, is when worldviews are so different that the guy who believes in honor killing just doesn't want to speak to the person who believes in life. What do you do? I don't know. And I think we're at that stage where there's such a disparity of worldviews that it might just well be the law of the jungle. You know what I mean? The law, I don't know. These are interesting times, but we got to search and fight for commonality here among human beings. Otherwise, it's like the apes against the apes versus the hippos, and the lions against the crocodiles. It's going to be mayhem.
Or the donkeys versus the elephants.
Right.
Well, I mean, listen, the United States is like, you ever been to someone's house for dinner and you go over to their house and you sit down and they're very wealthy? I don't know if you've ever done this. You sit and you sit down for dinner and then the children start fighting amongst themselves at the dinner table. The United States is like an enormous, rich, dysfunctional family. Okay? They cannot speak to one another. And then, but what the problem is with this cancel culture. The problem is with the definition of what words mean. Okay? So like, what is a capitalist? Is that negative, positive, or benign? Right? Like, you can insult someone today by calling them a capitalist. Right? Like, I'm a business owner. I deploy capital every day in order to increase my capital load. I want more capital. Okay? And there's different ways of doing that. Capital is broken up into various types of assets, one of which is cash. There's real estate. There's all manner of capital. The capital is in the investment, right? What it's worth. So, is someone who is accumulating capital, are they a capitalist? And if so, is that person does that mark them as a bad person? And a good question would be, would you switch with them if you could, right? Like, if you could switch wallets, would you? And I think most of those people accusing capitalists of being evil would probably switch wallets if they could, right? They're just, what we're dealing with is not what we're dealing with on the left and the extreme left. I'm not talking about the average person who votes liberal because they like decent social policies that create a safety net for people that are on hard times. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the extreme left people who are dictating the terms of the conversation so as to create an environment that people cannot disagree with them. And this continually gets ratcheted up and ratcheted up. And just like Jordan Peterson says, they use language to enforce it. Okay? So you can't say this. You can't say that. Otherwise, I get angry and I bring a mob to attack you. Whether that's on Twitter or whether that's an actual mob. And you're seeing this in the United States. You ever heard the term Vox Populi, Vox Dei? The voice of the mob is the voice of God. Right? That's actually happening in the United States right now. So you have this mob violence. Somehow these people are being incited towards this by a false narrative of systemic racism, and to me that's an interesting thing to unpack. Like for example, the Republic of California has a vote before it now to eliminate all the anti-discriminatory language in their constitution. So what that means is the Republic of California, so if you're listening to this, every state has its own constitution, and then there's a U.S. constitution, okay? There's a Canadian constitution. I don't think there's a provincial Ontario constitution, but every state in the Union of the United States has its own constitution. And so the Constitution of the Republic of California is removing all the anti-discriminatory language, meaning you're not allowed to discriminate based on race. You're not allowed to discriminate based on color or gender or sexuality or anything like this. Why do you think they are doing this? So they can discriminate. And who do you think they're going to discriminate against if they're able to accomplish this? Right? So they want to remove the language. So the idea of systemic racism. So this is what I'm talking about with the definition of words. What is a capitalist? What is a socialist? What is a feminist? Like, nobody can explain feminism to me. Like, feminism is actually impossible to explain. No, I'm serious. Like, it's literally, if someone says to you, I'm a feminist. Well, I say, what does that mean for me? Not for you. Tell me what it means for me. and then I will tell you if I support you or not. To say you're a feminist, that's opening up a bag of shit right there, I'll tell you, because it could mean all manner of things, right? So the definition of words. So if people say, I had a newsletter in May from my son's school, which at the bottom of it, Daniel, talked about inclusivity, diversity, and tolerance. Okay? The next month, the very next month, so there's a communications company behind this. The very next month, the same newsletter from a high school to students and their parents eliminated the tolerance language, the inclusivity language, and the diversity language, and replaced it with systemic bigotry language. Right? So now we don't want to include people in the system. We don't want to have a diverse environment where everyone's welcome to participate in polite and meaningful ways. We don't want to be tolerant. And by the way, tolerance is not a good feeling. So when people are told to be tolerant, there's a limit to tolerance, right? Mm-hmm. So all that is gone. And now we're talking about the system. And we're talking about that the entire system is built in order to perpetuate the wealth and well-being of white people at the expense of white straight men, at the expense of everybody else. And I'm sorry, but that is entirely false.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people need to educate themselves. I don't know. I don't come from that world. I don't adhere or relate to many things that you've said or that you conjured up in me. I think we got to look for commonalities. I'm happy that you ask people what do they mean when they mean this term or that term. I do think of Francis of Assisi, and we need maybe less words. Obviously, this is a podcast, so carry on, do your good work. But we need, in general, less words. Even Thomas Merton, a very good writer and thinker, said, there's such a lack of original talk. There's such a lack of original thinking, and so I tell you, no joking. To make your audience laugh, I pray every week that I get my voice gone, that God takes away my voice, like Zachariah, the husband of Elizabeth, cousin of Mary, because it's my words that get me in trouble. It's words and falsely communicated thoughts that get me in trouble. And it makes me think of John Henry Newman, who said, heart speaks to heart. If you look at all your relationships, all my relationships, the best moments is when nonverbal to nonverbal, somehow by being present, we communicate to the other, I care about you, I love, and we won't even need to say I love you. I care about you, you mean something to me, you're worth something to me, regardless of if the person in front of me is totally different from me. In other words, you mentioned all these terms of difference. It doesn't matter if I'm what I am to your eye. Whoever's in front of me, regardless of where they're from, what they've lived, let us at least speak heart to heart. It's much easier. So I don't know how we're going to affect change, Michael. People who believe in some things I've said, it's not a good platform for being elected to City Hall. It's not a good platform to be elected to Queen's Park or some other hall of government. But I pray that we figure out a way using judicious language, carefully picked language, or Jesus Christ, who I follow, who I believe his words as the life and the resurrection and the way. He mastered the wordsmithing. He mastered the ability to deflect like Bruce Lee, and give the recipient not what they wanted to hear, but what they needed to feel. And I kind of hope I could do that. I hope we can all do that.
It's an interesting thing you mentioned, communication. Okay, so you said less words. Well, Twitter tried that. It didn't work too good. It made everything worse. But that's just a pit of hell. I have a theory about social media. Okay,
Okay.
and I'll throw it at you, and you can tell me what you think. And then you said so much there, I just was taking notes, and I'm like, ah. So here's the thing. So the less words, Twitter. I think if you want to create a successful social media, you know what you have to do? You got to build a platform where people can exacerbate one of the 7 deadly sins. So Tinder would be lust, Facebook would
Right.
be envy, Twitter is rage. Um,
Right. Yes.
if you're able to do that, Instagram is vanity. Um, if you can take one of the 7 deadly sins and allow people to commit it like crazy as fast as possible, and then you cloak it in this idea of communication and it's connecting people and everything else, but really, Twitter is just about rage, man. That's all it's about. Like, it's a great place for, like, I'm not talking. So I use Twitter like this. I'll tweet, like, Scott tweets out things for me on my Twitter feed, and then I'll tweet out something and then I'll delete it, and I'll tweet out something and I'll delete it, or Twitter will take it down actually. But when you actually get into people that are into Twitter, what it's about is about insulting other people. It's about a takedown culture or saying what you think about them or something nasty. It's disgusting. You look at a tweet that's like from Donald Trump, say, or go and then look at all the comments. It's disgusting the things people write. Like, even if you hate the guy, I mean, it's the things that people write is beyond belief behind these Twitter handles. So Twitter's about rage. Instagram, the idea of flexing on the gram, that's all vanity, right? Bragging about your life. Facebook is about
Yeah.
creating envy in others. It's just, to me, it seems like that's how you turn that trick. Okay.
Well,
Um,
I think that's
Go ahead. Yeah.
brilliant. That's brilliantly said. And I think Pinterest, like I don't know, I'm not an expert, but Pinterest is maybe hedonism or more like gluttony. Like it's a lot of food and recipes. But
Mm.
I got to tell you, I don't know, and I have an ambivalent, the bittersweet relationship with social media because the clients want to be on there and the clients ought and fight to be on there. But I have this reticence or hesitation that you mentioned, rightfully so. I mean, it doesn't, social media on the whole, it does little to improve one's quality of life. And
Not
this is
only
where you
does it
have
do
to.
little, it damages your life. It's the other way around. It's actually the other way around. There, there is nothing. There is no safe amount of time on social media. There's no safe amount of use. It's not safe. It's not a good thing for humans to engage in. In fact, the fact that none of our laws apply to social media. We're not built as a social media culture. There's a lot of problems. You talked about taking away your voice. That's the logos, though, man. The idea
Well,
of the he that speaks the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Right? That idea of the logos is in your speech, right? So you can write it though too, maybe. But it's interesting. You brought up communication. So I have another little theory that came up. I want to throw it at you. I think speaking is like the 4th best way to communicate with somebody. I think touch or lack of touch. So the enforcement of touching and non-touching and to what degree is appropriate is the most important communication mechanism that humans have. So for example, if your wife won't touch you, but she says she loves you, well, you got a problem there, bud, right? Um, and so touch, or like for example, I don't touch women in my office that work for me or come in. I don't touch them, right? I may touch Kyle or one of my people that work for me. I may touch them, and touch them on the shoulder, but I don't touch women. And there's like a boundary there that's showing that allows the communication to flow. It's like, I'm not allowed to touch you. I'm allowed to touch you. This kind of stuff. Touch is a very important in the social communication. The second is facial expressions and body language, man. And the third is tone of voice. And the fourth is what you say.
right. Well, I
Right?
think what you're saying is anchored in proof. There's been the studies of this. I remember when I was going through communication school in Montreal, that was taught, and that's so important. So, I mean, for me, I don't necessarily mean shutting up completely, but really knowing when to shut up, and
Mm.
also knowing. I mean, thinking before I speak. It's a common principle. I don't adhere to it. I'm very passionate, emotional, but that gives me grief. So I think we can all stand to gain from that. Obviously, social media. I'm glad that you forewarn your audience or give them that opinion. I agree. I mean, it breaks relationships, it breaks families. So I think we have a lot of learning to do. And the thing is that I've seen. So now I'm changing, but I'm going to share this with you and your audience. I have not been at the front lines of war with arms and guns. So I have not seen the shedding of blood in warfare, but I have seen the shedding of life and the shedding of human dignity in a world that I've lived in, which is unchecked consumerism. So I want you, I know I'm changing your subjects, but Twitter, Instagram, all these social media platforms, they were all built for this goal of taking away your freedom, creating in you and your mom and your aunt and your uncle an addiction to a product, an addiction to a shortcoming that you will feel that is only going to be fulfilled by consuming someone else's product. I work in the belly of this beast, and no one can take that away from me because it's what I've lived. It's not from a textbook. In unchecked, unsatiable consumerism. I know what that's like. And it's evil and it's ugly and it's disgusting. And it creates slaves. And I face the challenge of being a pawn to those agents with lots of money, big companies, every single week. So this is not something I propagate and share with everyone, but I am doing my best in my mission or missionary territory, not building wells for water access. I'm trying to bring a little bit of humanity into organizations that have lost their conscience, that have lost their ethic or the desire to will the good of the other, and offer them a chair or offer them a pizza. And they've succumbed to, I want more money. I want my quarterly results. I want my increased Q over Q, same store sales growth. I want my margins, if I haven't said that. And this is the world I live in. And I got to tell you, I'm going to shock your audience because my parents are from the Middle East. So I've grown up fearing the mullahs or the ayatollahs in Iran or any other place, Beirut or anywhere else, where Al Azhar. I've gone, or even a Christian, any religious zealot nut who's an extremist and violent. That's to be feared. Sure, fear that mullah, but also fear the person in a suit, white tie, white shirt in Manhattan or Toronto, trying to take money with no conscience, regard for your kids or your relatives in what is the territory of unchecked consumerism. They're both evil. So sorry to complicate your life. My name is Daniel, and there's a prophet Daniel in it. Sometimes I think that I have a little bit of a connection by my name to this Daniel, but I'm sometimes doom and gloom, more like Jeremiah actually, because I see all this darkness around me. So you see, I struggle in my own life with my optimism versus pessimism because I see shitty evil all around me, violent with blood and non-violent with more white. So this is the issue, but I leave your audience to think about these things. Take it from me, who's been in the trenches, and it ain't pretty. So you need capitalism, in my opinion, Michael, but capitalism with a conscience, capitalism with desire, which comes from education, to want the good of the neighbor, to take care of the poor. That's a mouthful for you.
Names matter, Daniel Torchia. They
Okay,
matter.
that sounds good. Yeah.
I take inspiration from Saint Michael the Archangel, the slayer of devils, my friend. Believe me. Names matter. What your name is matters. Absolutely, for sure. That's why humans take so much time to think about names and why they name people certain things. And why cultures can take offense to naming kids certain things. Like there's laws about what you can name your kids in some countries. That was the first thing. I agree with you that names matter, and I think there's a spiritual side of our character that's invoked with your name when you're named. And I haven't watched this whole show. I probably should because I reference it so much. But that Game of Thrones, it's too pornographic for me. I can't deal with pornography. I don't like pornography at all. But I think it's totally unnecessary part of our comments, and we could go down that road right now. But they talk about the name day, not your birthday. The day you were named is the day you celebrate, right? Which was interesting.
Mhm.
Lots of things. Do you want to swear to the old gods or the new gods? I love that. That's such a good idea to think about for people, right? The other thing is that social media is like a tattoo. Okay, and why is it like a tattoo? Well, a lot of people think about tattoos and they're like, I'm going to get this tattoo. And they're like, my tattoo means this, right? This is the star. And then it's got this shooting asteroid coming towards it. And it means me. And I'm the asteroid. And the star is my destiny. And da 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 da. And I believe this. And da 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 da. And you tattoo it on yourself. Well, to me, that's a restriction of personal growth of character. Right? And I think the one good thing about words is that we can express words, except on a podcast here where it's recorded, but we can express words and they kind of evaporate into the ether. They go away, right? So if you said something offensive to somebody, you can apologize and nobody really remembers what you exactly said at that time, and you can grow out of that if you have some sort of negativity you're battling, and or when you were young you were stupid and or whatever, and the problem with social media is that all of the things that you've said are recorded. And so now in our society with the cancel culture, people can bring up things that you said 15 years ago. Seriously, like 2005 or 2009, they can bring it out and say, well, you said this on Twitter. So that's you. You're that guy. And you're still that guy. And you can't change. And you're always going to be like that. That's not human. Humans aren't like that. People grow, they change, their literally their chemicals in their body, the juice that's flowing in them, the amounts of the different mix changes throughout the course of your life. You go from a young, aggressive guy that wants to serve in the military, wants to play sports, to then you're like trying to get after a career, and then you're a grandfather one day, and you're mellow and you're relaxed, and your personality, your testosterone is lower, so you're just chilled out. These things are real, and so we grow and we change. So names matter, and these things, the spirituality matters. What I wanted to ask you is, I often deal with people that that ask me about their faith or their lack of faith. Okay, I don't know why this happens to me quite a bit, actually. Probably 2 or 3 times a week, right?
Wow.
That people will literally, while be talking to somebody, and they'll say something like, my parents really want me to be a Catholic, but I don't understand Catholicism. I don't get it. I don't want to go to church, and I don't really care. And why should I care? I got asked that question. I got asked that question last week by an employee. So I explained it to them why it's important. But the idea for you as a communications, you're in a very awkward position, Daniel, because it's almost like you have to speak other people's words.
Well, the good thing about us and my practice is that I have to invest energy in wordsmithing and massaging the message, but more importantly, I help clients behave a certain way. I help them change their behavior so that it allows for easy communications and harmony and good relationships later. So I have that particularity where I don't adhere to PR as spin doctors. I don't adhere to PR as just social and anything. I've anchored my practice on behavioral change at the source. So encouraging corporations to behave better is what I'm getting at, which is very good for me as a person because I like that. I go to bed well at night when I've encouraged a client to listen more or change their pricing or change their supply chain or maybe pollute less or maybe respect media more. There's certain little things that I enjoy doing that are my remit, my area of contribution are. And so I've been true to myself. I've been able to find clients that respect that. You see, because of the kind of PR that I practice, I'm not going to be well suited to work for big companies that have a rigid view, or companies that have an intolerance for compromise, companies that are so large that they are only seeking optimization of profits above ethics, above dialogue. And I could name company now. I just won't. But big companies
No, better
that
not
are
to.
that
Yeah,
are
everyone knows what you're talking about.
yeah, the big companies exactly are the ones basically most of the ones that have incredible quarterly results. You know what I mean? So
You can have incredible
I'm more
quarterly results, Daniel, and not. So what you're crying for is there's different kinds of capitalism, by the way. So the word capitalism is a group of of market ideologies or economic ideologies. So China exercises something called state capitalism. Okay, America not any longer, but I would say has a different. What America used to have and what the West used to have is something called free market capitalism embedded in a democracy. Okay, that's what you want. You want free markets, right? Embedded in a democracy. And what we have is sort of, see, the problem with the West is our relationship to China. And so what we did was, so they don't, this is a long, convoluted argument, but I'll get to it as quickly as possible. We have taken the inflation in our economy of goods. Okay, so real wages have stagnated, and we have taken our inflation, and what we've done is reduced the cost of products or allowed people to have more garbage, okay, like non-valuable things. Just go to a Value Village and sit outside the back as people drop off their shit, okay? Like, it's disgusting, dude, to watch. People pulling up and bags of clothes and toys and Chinese plastic. But what we've done is we've exported our inflation and taken back cheaper, less quality stuff. And so in doing so, we've created a different sort of capitalism. It's kind of like there's a free market is still there. The democracy is still a little bit there. But what we have is like a consumerist capitalism.
Yeah.
Which is,
yeah, you know,
I'm happy if I have the latest iPhone because now I have a status symbol. So my status is tied to this. Consumerism is tied up in status, where your status is expressed through what you have rather than who you are.
Right.
Right? Where the content of your character doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what you have or what you own as a perpetuation of some sort of false status to the world. I have the latest iPhone. I'm a chocoholic. I'm a like labeling yourself. I don't mean to say you're a workaholic or not. I just don't know what it means, right? So we have these labels, and the consumerist, you're a white male. Like, these things become very important when people are fueled by consumerism because they want to know who's preventing them from being the bigger consumer. Why should they have more stuff than me? Because he's white and the white people get more stuff. You see? And what matters is how much stuff you have. That's a new kind of consumerist capitalism that's creeped into our system and has been exacerbated by social media and sinful living, actually, on top of it. I sleep with more women than you, so I'm better than you. No, dude. How did you get that? So I think I know what you mean. The problem is, Daniel, nobody can really articulate it that well. And, that's the trouble here. Is that people don't know we have a Tower of Babel problem. People don't know at one part of the tower, don't know what other people are talking about anymore. You know, that's what the Tower of Babel story is about, is when things get so complicated, you try to build something so great that it's beyond what, and you lose your humility and love of God. People can't communicate anymore, so it falls apart. The mission falls apart. There's like a Tower of Babel thing going on in the West where people on the left can't understand what people on the right are even talking about. And so all they can do is name call and humiliate.
I don't know how to summarize. I mean, there's a lot of work to do. We got to help the young people to go on the right path. This is beyond one generation, Michael. Perhaps it's always been that way. But
no,
yeah,
it's different now. No, this is different. It hasn't always been this way. I mean, this may have happened before. I used a Tower of Babel reference. But the time we're in now is a different time. This is unique in human history this time. There's never been a time like this. And it's time to communicate, Daniel.
It is. Well, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Folks,
yeah.
If you want to get Daniel Torchia to help you with your communication, he's definitely one of the top at it. He's got you know what's interesting? I could talk to you about the difference between legal, ethical, and moral too, because he's talked a lot about ethics. I think that's a fascinating discussion we could have as well.
Anytime.
Maybe for another time. Where can they find out about Torchia Communications, Daniel?
Well, just Google Torchia Communications. Our website is torchiacom.com. My name is Torchia. And easy to find.
Easy to find. Torchia Communication, torchiacom.com, folks. But before you do that, I know why you listen to all this. We both know, because you have a big ego like me. And you want to record what you say. You want to do your own podcast. You're a subject matter expert on something. And you want to start a podcast, because most people that listen to podcasts really want to start a podcast. You know what? Podcasting is super fun. And in fact, there's a lot of things about podcasts I didn't get to talk to Daniel about. So I got to bring him back on to talk about what the difference between a podcasted recorded conversation is like and what a non-podcasted recorded. The huge difference there, how people behave. He's experienced it, but I didn't get talking about it, so I got to get him back on again. But anyway, folks, torchiacom.com. But what you really want to do, you don't want to have Daniel telling you what to say. You want to go to getagripstudios.com and you want to record your own podcast. That's getagripstudios.com. Check it out. Scotty's ready for you anytime. Hey, folks, from my heart, very grateful. If you've made it through all the way, super grateful for you for listening. And of course, to God, who's made all this possible. Thanks for listening.